Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Blue Line Blast podcast. We've been off for a week. We're back better than ever. The hockey season's right around the corner. I think a week from the national broadcast, a little over a week from the New Jersey Devils, but that doesn't matter. Here on the Blue Line Blast podcast, I'm your host, Jim Biringer, co-host Matthew Blittner. What's going on, buddy? Glad to be back.
Glad to be back as always. We've got a loaded show for you today, for everyone, Jim. We've got two great guests, both who are going to talk Islander heavy. We're going to be very much on Long Island for this one with Peter Schwartz and Stefen Rosner join us at points in the show. I almost feel like the booker a little bit for like WWE, figuring out how we're going to book things out throughout the rest of the show here.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be great. I mean, isn't this back-to-back episodes now for us with back-to-back two guests in the same episode?
Yes, that is true, actually.
And that's a first here. That's a first. That's history on this show.
More history for the show. Our last show was historic with who our guests were, and now we're having more history. Who knows? Maybe we'll make history again next week, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. But Jim, someone who did make history
is Kirill Kaprizov.
Yeah,
Kirill. You took the words right out of my mouth, buddy. You just took the words right out of my mouth.
Look, I know everyone said when he rejected the 8-year, $16 million per deal that was offered to him by Minnesota, everyone said, well, there's got to be one of three things going on. Either A, he doesn't want to be in Minnesota. B, he doesn't want to sign for so long because with the cap going up exponentially over the next few years, he doesn't want to lock himself into what might be a bargain rate for the team after this. Or he just wants more money on top of what would have already been a historic largest deal in history. Jim, I think it's safe to say now, actually, I don't need to think, it is safe to say now, he wants to be in Minnesota. He doesn't care about the cap going up too much over the next few years because, Jim, he signed for more than what was being offered to him. And, I mean, Minnesota absolutely negotiated against themselves on this, but I guess they sort of had to. They didn't want a Marian Gaborik situation. But he signed for 8 years, which, of course, is the maximum, and $17 million a year instead of $16 million. Jim, I've got some thoughts on this, but let's hear your thoughts first.
All right. First off, since we like to bring in our other interests into this show, everybody's got a price for the $1 million man.
Oh, boy.
And Kaprizov got his price. Look, you said it before. You said it. They outbid themselves. They negotiated against themselves. However, I think they needed to. And here's why. Because I've heard, there's been a lot of reports out there. But the biggest thing was Bill Guerin wanted an 8-year deal from Kaprizov. He didn't get it last time. He got a 5-year deal last time. He didn't want to do that again. So it comes down to, okay, well, Kaprizov's camp's like, all right, well, if you want 8 years, then I want to be the highest paid player in the game, the highest paid winger right now, and most likely will be for many years. So you have to go up. And I think the problem is...
He's already going to be the highest paid at 16.
Right. But I'm saying he's going to be there for a very long time because I don't think anybody's in a stratosphere right now. Because we saw Mitch Marner, the Rantanens, it was 12. That was what they got. Kyle Connor may come in at 11. Kempe may come in at 11. Jack Eichel's a center. He'll come at, 13, 5, 14? And we'll get to that in a minute. But what I'm saying is yeah, you had to go to 17 because you got to compromise, right? Team wants 8. Player wants more. Let's do it. The issue I had was negotiation 101 said, you don't come out and say, we give the player whatever he wants. And then they were talking about it in the media. Something gets leaked. Everybody denies it gets leaked. Then Guerin and Leopold say, we're not talking about it anymore. It's private. And then boom, a deal gets done. I think whoever leaked it was just like, look, we want to get this done. He likes it there. He wants to be there. But like you said, they were down this road before with Gaborik. However, Kirill Kaprizov is in another universe and a stratosphere than Marian Gaborik because Kaprizov is a superstar player, something the Minnesota Wild have never seen in their history.
He absolutely is a superstar. He's not a better goal scorer than Marian Gaborik was. Okay, let's be honest. Marian Gaborik was an absolute sniper. Yes, Kaprizov is a better playmaker. I I don't like what this contract says. This contract, in essence, says that Kirill Kaprizov is the second best player in the National Hockey League. Because let's be honest, no one's going to even say, if Connor McDavid said, I only want $5 million a year, no one's saying that, because someone's making $17 million a year, that he's better than McDavid. That's not the case. So you're pretty much saying that Kaprizov is the second best player in the league and literally the best player outside of Connor McDavid. Now, I don't know that that's actually accurate and true because he's not. Yes, he's a superstar player. Is he that much better than Mitch Marner? Is he that much better than Austin Matthews? I know, again, center versus wing. Is he that much better than Jack Eichel? Is he that much better? I don't know that he's actually that much better. Is he that much better than Mikko Rantanen? I don't know that he's actually all that. Is he that much better than Leon Draisaitl? It doesn't say good things. And then, if you want to look at it, so the original offer was $16 million per, which is $2 million more than Draisaitl's 14. So he held out for 17, and look, kudos to him for holding out to get what he wants. The maximum he could have gotten was 19.1, because that would be 20% of the cap this year. And it goes by, even though the contract wouldn't be in effect this year, it goes by the year that you sign it. So that would be the maximum that he could get. So are you so petty that you have to, that you only want $1 million more than what they were offering? Go for the 18 or something. And again, not to say Minnesota is going to give you the 18, but the fact that it's $1 million more per year, which is $8 million more over the life of the contract. That's what the big difference was. I can understand if the difference was 14 to 18. That's a lot. 16 to 17. I don't know, Jim. It seems very, very petty, and you can put that as my blast from the blue line because I'm calling Kaprizov out. He's being very petty on having, insisting on just $1 million more per year.
I mean, look, if you look at it, right, it all depends really, right? Because were the signing bonuses the way he wanted? Now, remember, this contract is still eligible for the current CBA signing bonuses. And most of this contract is front-loaded, paid in signing bonuses and everything like that. If you look at the first 5 years, he gets $18.1 million in signing bonuses. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
what he gets.
Base salary.
Right, exactly. That goes away.
19.1.
Right, exactly. So, and that gets to 20% of the cap for the first 5 years of this deal, based on this cap, based on 95.5, not based on what it's going to be at 104 next year, or maybe a little bit more. But was he petty? Maybe. We know those players, they like the money. We've seen it, right? Panarin got his money. Bobrovsky got his money. The issue was Minnesota could ill afford to lose this player. We saw it with Gabrick, so they had to pay him whatever he wanted. And again, it goes back to the point earlier. You can't say it because everybody knows it, but you don't say the quiet part out loud. And they were saying the quiet part out loud, and they did everything to keep him there. And Bill Guerin wasn't going to trade him. They didn't want to move him. He wanted to be there. It's all great. It's all well and good. The issue is if he did go to another team, we all heard all this talk about Marner getting 13, 14, 15 from different teams. Oh, Carolina's going to pay him this much. Again, I am standing on, maybe this is my blue line blast in the same segment. Carolina Hurricanes are not paying anybody more than Sebastian Aho. Yes, you can connect them to any player you want. Tom Dundon will not pay them. Period. End of discussion. So Carolina wasn't paying Kaprizov that much money. Any other place he went, he was getting Rantanen's deal, maybe a little bit more. Minnesota was only going to give him more. I'm being honest. If you look at the cap structure and wanting to win in good teams aren't handing out $17 million. He was convinced Minnesota's going to be a winner soon.
The New York Rangers are that team that would have given him 17.
At 35 years old, they would have done it, as Russ says.
The New York Rangers were going to do that. They were going to do, especially with Panarin coming off the books. They were gonna do 17. Let's call it what it is. Okay, the Rangers were going to give him 17. But again, you didn't address my point though. he's not the second best player.
Oh no, he's not. He's not even close to the second best player in the league.
How are you paying him as if he is?
Well, you go to the NBA.
Precedent.
Go to the NBA. How many guys are in the stratosphere of the top players? Because I mean, I know the NBA is different when it comes to salary structures and where they get their money, but some of these guys are getting paid like top players in the NBA because that's what the market is, and that's how the market's been set. And some of those guys don't deserve to get that money. Look, do I think Kaprizov's the second best player in the league? No, but if he didn't go down to injury, he's a Hart Trophy finalist last year.
Hart Trophy finalist, yes, but
he's not winning it, obviously, but he might have. I don't know. He might have, but I don't agree. Like, I will give you that.
He's going to get injured more. You know it. He's been that way. And, I mean, speaking of injury, Minnesota Wild news today, Max Zuccarello out 7 to 8 weeks. That's, I covered Max Zuccarello.
Great guy, by the way. Great guy. Shout out to Max Zuccarello.
Early in my career covering the Rangers, there could not have been a nicer, more genuine player who was so happy to be in the NHL. The fact that he's on, and him and Kaprizov have like that twin telepathy type of thing on the ice. So, this is going to affect the Wild, and this is going to affect Kaprizov.
Yeah, I think so too. You still got Matt Boldy there. You got Joel Eriksson, Marco Rossi, guys like that. While they're dealing with some injuries, you hopefully don't lose those guys down there. There's been a lot of injuries, though, across the board. Obviously, Alexander Barkov goes down, torn ACL. He's done for the year. Like, that's huge for Florida. They're already dealing without Matthew Tkachuk. Without it, he's going to be out till January. And that's a tricky situation, too, right? Because with the Panthers, they got to balance that playoff cap now, like a lot of teams have to. All right, is he coming back? Is he not coming back? Who are we going to add? How are we going to put him on? And I think this playoff cap, when it comes to negotiations, not so much for the top guys, like the Kyle Connors and the Kempes, but the guys in that mid-tier, right, that next tier down, they may not get as much as they expected because teams got to put together a salary cap and a roster based on a salary cap in the playoffs.
Great point. And, as we segue into, I guess, this next topic of ours here, I will say this when it comes to Barkov. He's out 7 to 9 months. If he's back in after 7, he's there for the start of the playoffs, which means that they cannot exceed the cap during the regular season by more than like a little over $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
If he's out to 9, he's gone fully, regardless of whether they go to the top or not, which means that they can exceed the cap by 10 mil during the regular season. That's a big difference on what Bill Zito has at his disposal. And they have to make that decision fairly, maybe not soon, maybe not in the next host, but they have to make that decision because it will determine how they go about building out the roster. And, it's one of those things where you hate to see it, but it is one of those things that's going to have some very unique situations that are going to crop up over the next couple of years with the playoff cap and teams having to balance how things go from before they even know, if they might even be a playoff team or not.
Yeah, I mean, look, and just a final point on that, I think it's a bigger factor. It's not a hard decision, but it is a hard decision now. I think it's going to be easier for teams when guys get hurt in February. Like, okay, he's got torn ACL or he's got this. Is he really going to be back? We could just pop him on. And don't forget, Barkov's not eligible to come back. If they put him on season-ending LTIR, he can't come back even in the playoffs. Like, he's done for the year. So that loophole's kind of closed. So it's unfortunate for the Panthers, but they always got something up their sleeve when they're cooking some things up. But let's stay in this realm real quick as we bounce around different rumors in the NHL. And I guess we got to stay in with the guys behind me, right? I mean, New Jersey, Luke Hughes. I mean, did anybody expect it to get this far?
Yes. Because I am very cynical when it comes to these type of things. Okay? From everything that I've heard, everyone who I've spoken to, and yes, the Devils organization can say, oh, it's our priority, it's this, we don't expect it long, whatever words they want to say. When you have a young player like a Luke Hughes, who has been in the league only a couple of years, it's not like he's been in the league 6 years, Jim. He's been in the league, 3 years? Really 2, because, the first time he came up, he was up and down a little bit. And the player really digs in because he had such a viewpoint of himself as, as this big grand view of how he plays. And now maybe that's partially because, of who his brothers are, especially the brother who he plays with, and the agent and the family and all that. Jim, I know we have expressed optimism on the show before that, maybe he would just miss like a couple days of training camp. He'd be back before. Jim, I've fully expected that he would miss opening night. Not opening night against the Panthers in Newark. I think it gets resolved before then. But opening night of the season down in Carolina, I'm going to go out. I'm going to give you a second blast from the blue. I'm calling he's not going to be there.
Wow.
Whether he is signed and he's just not game ready, or he's just not signed, he will not be in the opening night lineup against the Carolina Hurricanes. And Jim, it's back in 1961, the Yankees had the M&M boys of Mantle and Maris.
Yep.
The NHL right now has the L&L boys, because you've got 2 Loops who are both holding out, one for the Devils and one for the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, and the one
seems to come to agreement on money.
Yeah, and the one in Nashville is a little crazy because like precedent and contract is out there for guys like Vasily Podkolzin just signed like a 3-year deal that like $2.95 million AAV, a little more than that. And then there's other guys out there that are making a little over 3. And I know Evangelista wants at least $3.25 million, if not more, on a 2-year deal. But he's seen what happened in Nashville. These young guys have been in and out of the lineup, not used properly, and then go to other teams and thrive. He's like, well, I want to know cost certainty. I want to know if I'm going to be playing. That was the same reason why Mason McTavish took so long. He's like, okay, got a new coach, but I want to know that I'm going to be second-line center, maybe first-line center. I want my dollars. Meanwhile, you got to give a little give and take here, like we saw with the Kaprizov deal, but more so with the Verbeek deal, because Verbeek was hell-bent on a 5-year deal. McTavish's camp was like 7, 8, more so 8 times 8. We're like, all right, let's meet in the middle, 6 times 7. Yeah, there we go. Not to try to date myself, I know what that means. So, yes. However, with this situation in New Jersey, I've had this gut feeling since the summer thinking about this, because the way this team likes to operate, and look, we've seen other players with less time in the league get the bag and get the money. Brock Faber, Jake Sanderson. Those guys don't cause the turnovers Luke Hughes does in his own zone. And he needs a little bit more seasoning. However, I understand both sides of this thing, but I also understand the Devils' viewpoint here. Like, dude, have you really earned wanting to be paid like Dougie Hamilton, a guy who was in the league a long time? Like a Brock Faber? Like, are you in that zone? They're digging in because they are working. They want a salary structure with this team, and they're working. Now, both sides want a long-term deal, but again, money's an issue. Somewhere along the line, somebody's got to go up and somebody's got to go down, and you got to meet in the middle. And again, structure, trade clause, how things are deferred, this and that. You have all these tools in the toolbox, but the problem is October 7th comes, those tools go away.
Very true. And Jim, right at our last point here before we get to our first guest in Peter Schwartz and our non-existent sponsor break, I want to say this about Luke Hughes and the Devils. As my father has said ever since I was old enough to talk, a good compromise, both sides are a little unhappy. The Devils they need to be a little unhappy with how much money they give, and Luke is going to need to be a little unhappy with knowing that, okay, he's going to get a badge, but he's not going to get as much as maybe, he thinks that he should get. And Jim, I'm going to leave us at that. as we head into our non-existent sponsor break here on Blue Line Blast Podcast. On the other side, we'll be talking with Peter Schwartz, the host of Sports Bash Media, an anchor for WFAN 660, and pretty much just the king of all Long Island sports media. Jim, back after this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from our non-existent sponsor break. Again, I'm Matthew Blittner with co-host Jim Biringer. We're joined now by one of our special guests of the evening, Peter Schwartz, anchor for WFAN 660 radio, as well as the host of Sports Bash Media, and pretty much just the king of Long Island sports media when it comes to things. Peter, welcome to the Blue Line Blast Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We appreciate you being on here tonight, and can't wait to talk some hockey with you.
Yes, It's great that the hockey season's here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Peter, to get it started here, Islander fans have a lot of things going on. There's positives, there's negatives, there's neutral feelings. You've been around this team now in training camp, obviously, new GM, new first round, first overall pick, new, way that the team is operating. What's some reason for optimism when a lot of people have the Islanders probably finishing, 5th or 6th in the Metro? What's some reasons for optimism?
Well, I think just there's a whole breath of fresh air around the franchise. There really is. I mean, and this is not to disparage Lou Lamoriello, because when he joined the Islanders in 2018, they needed a change in culture, and he provided that. And the Islanders won a lot of games on his watch, but you can sense over the last couple of years that the franchise had gotten stagnant a bit, and it was time for a change. And when they brought Matthew Darsh in as the general manager, you started to see, things change, not just from a hockey standpoint, but just overall organizational. There's much more access for fans and for media, and there's more fan friendly things that are going on. And I noticed it just inside the organization at the Matthew Darsh introductory press conference. You can tell, Islander employees that, might not have been smiling all the time, we're smiling. I mean, they got to do, some things that just, you couldn't do under the last, number of years with Lou in charge. And that's not the most important thing. The fans want to see the team win. And I think Matthew Darsh has a really good plan. And obviously, when you look at some of the moves that they've made in the offseason, they've added a little skill, some speed. And obviously, Matthew Schaefer first overall. They won the draft lottery before Matthew Darsh became the GM, but he was pretty fortunate to be the recipient of getting a first overall pick. And you could just see, Matthew Schaefer, especially at the game last night, the Islander Ranger game last night, you could just see his development so quickly from development camp, all the way through now, almost done with preseason. He's barely 18 years old, but it really looks like he belongs. It looks like he's going to be a pretty special player. The Islanders added Jonathan Drouin during the offseason as a free agent, and you can see that he had some skill. Max Shabanoff, they won the sweepstakes with him, getting him from the KHL. And I really think Anthony Duclair also, his return, he looks to be a lot energized and healthy. So I think there's a lot of reasons for the Islanders and their fans to be optimistic. Now, the proof will be in the pudding once the season starts, but you could just sense that there is almost like a breath of fresh air around the team.
Yeah, when it comes to Matthew Darsh and especially, head coach Patrick Waugh, there was some uncertainty whether or not he was going to keep the coach around. He ultimately keeps Waugh around. And that was the big thing. You touched on it, Peter. Offense, skill. That wasn't what we saw under the Lamoriello reign. From watching these games and seeing the Islanders, especially against the Rangers and during this preseason, do you see Watt opening up the offense a little bit more like he did in his junior days when he won the Memorial Cup?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see that. And I think the fact that Matt Barzal is going back to playing center is a big reason why. And there's been innuendo and rumors that Watt and Lou did not agree on how the roster needed to be made up. And I'm sure that's one of the big reasons why Darsh decided to keep Patrick Waugh, at least for this year, because they're probably on the same page as to what this team needs to look like. They needed to get younger, they needed to get faster, they needed to add more skill. And I think the Islanders did all of those things in the first off season for Darsh. Now, Rome's not built in a day. There's going to be more to come. And the next couple of seasons, but I think you can certainly see why these two guys are on the same page with the moves the Islanders made. And also you start to look, other parts of the organization. Bridgeport's going to be better. They changed their coaching staff this year. And for the first time really in a number of years, the Islanders have not only, more skill at the NHL level, but you look around the AHL and you look at their prospect pool in juniors and in colleges, and there's reason to believe that the Islanders in the next couple of years could have a really good young hockey team with a lot of skill and a lot of speed, and I don't know if that would have been the case had they stayed stagnant.
No, absolutely. It's always important to make progress, not just at the NHL level, but in the AHL level as well, as you just mentioned. And I'm curious, obviously, first overall pick, Matthew Dosh, looks like he's going, not Matthew Dosh, Matthew Schaefer. Sorry, too many Matthews going around here.
Matthews are spelled differently too.
Yeah, and Matthew Barzal as well. But for Schaefer, obviously it looks like he's going to break camp with the team. Do you view this as an opportunity where the team is saying no matter what, he's going to be up the entire season, or do you feel this would be a situation where maybe at some point he gets a little AHL seasoning?
I think he's going to make the team, and certainly the Islanders have 9 games to play with him to see if they feel like he's ready at the NHL regular season level. So I do think he'll be he'll be on the roster opening night when they're in Pittsburgh to play the Penguins. Everything that I've seen from this kid, shows me that he's got the poise and he's got maturity, beyond his age, and you can see it, especially last night. I mean, his skating is elite. He sees the ice so well. And partnered with Scott Mayfield, who I think wound up being the perfect partner for him on the blue line. I think is working out really well, and you can see he's already got a little connection going on with Barzal, and they've found each other a few times on the ice last night also. And remember, he's a defenseman, so as everyone will say, you can be as slick offensively as a defenseman all you want, and he is, but you also have to be responsible in your own end, and you've seen that last. In training camp from him, and you saw, last night that amazing, back check to swipe the puck away from Matt Rempe on that breakaway when he came out of the penalty box after an Islander power play. So, to me, he has shown more than I think you could have even asked for. And here's the other situation the Islanders are facing here is that their options are limited. There's two things at play here. Either they keep him on the roster to start the season, or they send him back to juniors. He can't go to the AHL. He's not old enough to be sent. And I think that's where I think they really have to take a good long look at that rule. I know they're talking about making a change to make it younger, but it still wouldn't affect Matthew Schaefer. But you almost look at him as an 18-year-old. He, from what I understand, talking to people around the area otters, there's nothing more for him to prove at the junior level. And while he might need some more seasoning at the pro level, the best thing for him probably was to start the season in Bridgeport and play 10 or 15 games and then get called up, but they can't do that. So I think he's going to cut his teeth at the NHL level, and if they feel like he needs a night off, they'll give him the night off, and maybe they'll do what they did with Noah Dobson a few years ago, and he'll be a limited player in his rookie year. But I think he's got a chance to be more than that. I really do. I mean, I'm watching him in practice and watching him in these preseason games. You could just tell there's something special about him.
Yeah, I mean, he came out of nowhere last year because the Long Island kid, James Higgins, who went to the Boston Bruins, was the consensus number 1 pick, and then Schaefer took his place. And again, I think a lot of people were clamoring to get the deal at the draft, get everybody in town, Higgins and Schaefer. But yeah, I've been really impressed with Schaefer as well. But you mentioned a guy earlier, Peter, and his name's Jonathan Drouin, and I was really impressed with him in Colorado. He's done some great things. He's rejuvenated his career. And now coming on the island with a guy he's familiar with, and that's just a great signing for a team that needs the skill on the offense to go along with Barzal and Horvat and Palmieri, because let's be honest, the Islanders were getting up there in age.
Yeah, there's no question. And again, you mentioned it. We talked about it before. Skill, some speed. And here's the other thing, too, is, and this was really important in the Islanders bringing him in, is the Islanders' power play was god-awful last year. And also their penalty killing was as well. And, you could make the argument that if the Islanders' power play and their penalty killing was just a little bit better last year, the Islanders would have been in the playoffs. And I think Drouin adds that dimension. He gives them some more skill, but he also gives them a little more pop on the power play. So I think it helps the Islanders in a number of areas. He's fit in very, very well with that locker room. And I just think that when you look at the moves that Darsh made, at the end of the year, when you look back on it, again, we don't know if the Islanders will be in the playoffs or not, or how far they would go. But I think it's going to show this year that Drouin was a really good pickup for the Islanders.
Absolutely. And as much as Drouin seems like he'll be a very good pickup, one place that the Islanders, and you could disagree with me, they didn't really seem to make pickups is for a backup goalie for Ilya Sorokin. Now, we've seen over the last 4 years, Sorokin has finished in the top 8 in Vezina each of the last 4 years, which is terrific. But he wears down at the end of each year, which is only natural. And they don't seem to have, we still don't know when Varlamov's going to be back. What's your take on the goalie and backup goalie situation? Because this seems like it could be one of those things that undoes the good feeling that Darsh has built around the team.
Yeah, well, there's no question. I mean, for a couple of years there, the Islanders were, the apple of a lot of people's eyes around the NHL with their 1-2 goaltending tandem. And remember, that even goes back to when Robin Lehner was in the mix. The Islanders have always, and certainly under the Lou era, have always had, a solid 1-2 punch when it comes to goalies, because goalies need a break. There's no question about it. And from an Islanders standpoint, and this goes back a long way, but you go back to the Stanley Cup era, and for 1 year it was Billy Smith and Chico Resch, and then Roland Melanson turned out to be such a huge backup for the Islanders, at least during the regular season. And they have to find that they have to find at least a temporary replacement for Varlamov, because there's no word yet on when Varlamov will be able to play. And you have to imagine, once he's ready to go, I would think he'd have to get a game or two in Bridgeport, because he hasn't been in a preseason game, obviously. And right now, it looks like David Rittich would be the backup goalie right now. And I think he gave up a couple of weak goals last night, even admitted after the game in the locker room that his reads on a couple of those shots were not good. So it's going to be a problem. And I'm sure you'll see Sorokin play, I would think, at least 8 of the first 10 games if Varlamov is not back by that point. And that's the problem. He does wear down. He was never used to playing this many games over in Russia. So we're going to see, Hogberg was placed on waivers today. He clears waivers. He'll probably go to Bridgeport. And we'll see how that goes. But at that right now, it's going to be a lot of Sorokin and Rittich, when Sorokin needs a blow. But it is an issue. You'd love to have that safety blanket in Varlamov back.
Yeah, I mean, the Islanders duo was always one of the best to get it done with their goalies and their defense. But, there's a player that, I've always circled and I had my eye on for a while with the Islanders. And I love the development of a guy like Kyle McLean. What have you seen from him in his development this year in training camp and into the preseason?
Yeah, he's he's done well. Obviously, he opened up some eyes last year, and he'll be in the mix here. There's still some cuts to make before the end of the season. I'm sure McLean will be in the mix here for one of these last roster spots. And, he's battling with some of the other guys in camp. Cal Ritchie's making a push for that last spot. But I really like Kyle McLean. I mean, listen, he's definitely the epitome of a fourth line player. He's got some skill. He can play the physical game. He's, responsible in his own end. So he'd be a perfect guy to have on that fourth line. And, we'll see how it works out. And there's still some decisions to make in the next week or so, with one more preseason game to go. But I've been very impressed with McLean. And obviously this is going to be an interesting year for him, because, his father is not an assistant coach with the team anymore. So we'll see if that winds up being, a difference maker. Does that improve his game? Does that affect him that his father is not there on the coaching staff? That's going to be an interesting thing to look at as well.
All very interesting points, Peter. And, before we let you go and wrap up here, we've waffled back and forth a little bit. Can the Islanders make it? Will they not make it? If they do make it, how far? Give us your crystal ball. Look into that crystal ball that you own and tell us, where do the Islanders finish the 2025-2026 season?
I look at this roster. Look, I'll step back for a minute. I thought before last season the Islanders were a playoff team. And we talked before about, the two things that prevented them from making the playoffs last year, and that was their power play and their penalty killing. And I think those two things should be improved this year. So I'll say the same thing. When I look at this roster from top to bottom, this roster looks like a playoff team to me. And I don't know if they have a playoff run in them, because they're probably not ready for that yet. But when I look at this roster, if everything breaks the right way for them and players play to the back of their hockey cards and they get good goaltending and the special teams gets better, I think this is a team that when we're talking about it in April will be in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Well said, Peter. Again, thank you for joining us here on the Blue Line Blast podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, check out Peter Schwartz pretty much anywhere that involves Long Island and sports combined, especially the Sports Bash media. Peter, thank you so much, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.
You got it. Thanks, guys, for having me, and happy new hockey year.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from our non-existent sponsor break. That was our Islanders preview with the great Peter Schwartz. We will be joined soon by our other great guest of the evening, who will also be doing an Islander preview, Stefen Rosner of NHL.com, the El Monsters, the Hockey News. Pretty much the guy has built an Islander media empire for himself. But before we get there, Jim, I think there's something very poetic that happened over the weekend in hockey that deserves to be mentioned.
The flower.
The flower. Not only did Marc-Andre Fleury go back where it began, but he actually played a little over a period to, shootout and everything. And Jim, more athletes should do it. Now, not if they've, played 3 years and no one knows who they are, but players who have been around for a long time, who maybe leave to go someplace else towards the end of their career, absolutely 110%. You see it more in other sports than you do in hockey. Jim, I love the fact that Marc-Andre Fleury did this with the Penguins in the preseason.
Yeah, I loved it. I was up in Vermont watching a game on my tablet because I was flipping back and forth. I had the college football on, but I was like, I know Flowers playing. And I've always liked Marc-Andre Fleury. This full circle moment. Again, I'm going to use more wrestling references here. John Cena's last time is now. Sorry for all the wrestling references. But, it was great to see because he was a guy that came up with Malk and Letang and Crosby in the core, right? All those guys were together. They won the Stanley Cups. Yeah, was he a backup of Matt Murray was there? Yes, but he played pivotal roles in both those times because Murray went down to injury. So he did win 3 Stanley Cups with that team. He took Vegas to a cup final, played really well in Chicago before he went to Minnesota. He played well in Team Canada at the World Championships. This dude retired to play more hockey since he retired. But he was still joking. He was the guy he was in, still
a prankster too.
Exactly, like 24/7 Marc-Andre Fleury. So it was great to see. I loved every minute of it, and it was awesome. Love to see full circle moment for him. And, that's the way guys need to go out.
Jim, before we bring in our next guest in Stefen Rosner, I do just want to say Columbus did not understand the assignment.
No.
They had to let Marc-Andre Fleury shoot for an empty net, and they did not understand the assignment. Columbus, look, no one gets on you, and rightly so for a lot of things. You've had a very emotional 15 months. You needed to let the flower shoot for the empty net there. Jim, I've said my piece. Let's go to our non-existent sponsor break and then bring in our guest, Stefen Rosner. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again from our last non-existent sponsor break. Again, I'm Matthew Blittner, co-host Jim Biringer on the Blue Line Blast podcast. We're joined now by the man who has built himself an Islanders media empire in Stefen Rosner. He writes about the Islanders for NHL.com. He writes about the Islanders for the Hockey News. He's got a Substack that you can subscribe to called the El Monsters. He's got a podcast there. Formerly of the Hockey Night in New York podcast. Stefen, is there anything Islander related you don't do?
No, I am on Blue Sky also. So
Blue Sky as well. So
He's everywhere. He's everywhere. This guy's everywhere.
I do like him.
Name Mr. Islander soon.
Yeah. Let's not go that far there. People have called me the mini Maven. The Mavens called me that. No one else can call me that. But no, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a crazy ride. I'll say that.
Absolutely. And, Stefen, to get us started here a little bit, we were talking with Peter Schwartz, earlier in the show doing some Islander stuff, but it's time to really dig down deep here. And we'll start Captain Anders Lee, obviously dealing with an injury. Lee, not the player that he was back in 2019, but still very serviceable player, middle of the lineup type. How do you see this affecting the Islanders both on and off the ice in the room as they get prepared for the 25-26 season?
Yeah, he's going to be fine. I'm pretty sure he's going to play in the preseason game tomorrow, Thursday night in Philly. That's the plan, at least as of today, per Patrick Waugh. He was in a red non-contact jersey for 2 or 3 straight practices, but the last 2 days he's been a full participant skating alongside Matthew Barzal and Kyle Palmieri. So I think he's going to be good. He said it was something that was, nagging him, and they thought it would go away, and it didn't. So he's good now. He's as close to ready. He thinks he's going to be ready for the regular season. So it shouldn't affect them at all. The good news about the Islanders this year, and we'll see if it actually works, is they have forward depth, especially the winger position. So if Anders Lee couldn't go, you have a McLean, you have a Gatcomb, maybe even a Callum Ritchie, dare I say it. But the Islanders are more equipped this year to handle these injuries. So Anders Lee should be fine, but they do have reinforcements in case a guy like Anders Lee, or let's say a guy like Anthony Duclair had a setback, which he didn't. He looks really good. They have backup now that's maybe the best depth they've had in quite some time.
And, you look at the New York Islanders, and we mentioned this with Peter, but I want a little bit more deep dive with you on this. Matthew Darche comes in, new general manager, and it seemed like the first thing he looked at and said to himself, this team needs more offense. And because the last couple of years, that's all we've talked about in the offseason with this team. Did he get those offensive weapons this offseason?
Yeah, I think it's a 2-part question. I think the biggest issue between Lou Lamoriello and Patrick was, when Lou hires Patrick, you're thinking, there's no way this could work. You have one guy that is, the outgoing, angry, fueling hothead, and the guy that keeps quiet, right? And you're thinking, okay, how's this going to work? And I mean, it worked. Patrick Waugh comes in and gets the team. They go 8-3-0 to end the season, or 8-0-3. They went on that 11-game point streak to get in. They actually clinched it at the Devils that one day a couple years ago in Game 82 or Game 81, excuse me. But Patrick Waugh wants to win the 5-4 games. Lou Lamoriello wanted to win the 1-0 games. And when you have two guys that have different viewpoints, it's kind of tough when the coach says something and the GM is saying another thing, right? Behind closed doors. So I think for Patrick Waugh and Matthew Darche, to go back to your original point here, they both want to be offensive teams. They want to win those 5-4 games, right? And I think you look at Patrick Waugh spoke the other day, Jonathan Drouin. He's not a guy that's going to score 30, 40 goals. But what he's going to do is he's going to set up Bo Horvat as much as possible this year. Those two guys are in lockstep with how to play. Horvat's a give-and-go guy. And Patrick Waugh even said today, I was asking about Drouin, and he said when free agency opened up, Patrick Waugh had Drouin's name circled because he saw the way Drouin played power play as well, but 5-on-5. This is a guy that can play with Bo Horvat. So you look at that. You look at the acquisition of Maxim Shabanov. What a breakout year in the KHL. Can it translate? He looked really good in rookie camp, as he should. During training camp, he's playing against NHLers for the first time. You can see that he's not going to have as much time and space as he thought he was going to have. He's got to be a little smarter, maybe north-south, not as much east-west, geeking, all that stuff. But he's a guy that should be able to provide offense. Simon Holmstrom's coming off a breakout year as well. This is a guy that's going to, he's playing on the third line right now to start with Jean-Gabriel Pageau and Anthony Duclair. I think that's how they're going to run things. But Holmstrom's a guy that should be a 20-plus goal scorer, 25-plus assist guy. Matthew Barzal being back healthy, missing 50 games last year, back at his natural position of center. He's arguably been the Islanders' best forward, maybe with Bo Horvat throughout training camp. So I think they have the offense. Anders Lee coming off 29 goals last year. Maxim Sipakov another year in the NHL. And we have to look at Matthew Schaefer, guys. I mean, he's a guy that's going to start alongside Scott Mayfield, 18-year-old. He's making the team. But I think you're going to see really quickly that not only is he going to deserve more minutes, he's going to be a big part in how Islanders win games this year. And I think it's his offense, his defense, but he's going to be relied upon heavily. So is Tony DeAngelo. So I think the Islanders, they didn't get that elite guy. And I think we talk about that all the time where they didn't get that elite guy to, those back-to-back semifinal runs. You need that goal scorer. They thought Duclair could be that guy last year. He gets hurt in Game 5. Tears his groin off the bone. Barzal gets hurt. There goes that. Now they bring in Drouin. They have Duclair another year. They have added Shabanov. So the hope is that they do have enough offense. It's going to come down to the defense and Sorokin for me, guys. And I think you don't need as much offense as you think. People think the Islanders need that offense. Yeah, it would help. But if Sorokin can find a way to get back to elite level and the defense can make his life a little easier, they'll win those. They'll score goals. Maybe they'll win the 5-4 games, but they'll win the 4-3, 3-2 games as opposed to last year where they blew a lot of those games.
All great points, Stefen. And, I do agree with you that the Islanders, it's the defense and the goaltending that's going to win them the games. But I do want to stick on the offense for 1 second here. Matthew Barzal, as you mentioned, back at his natural position center, back healthy. We've seen what he can do when healthy over the course of a full season. Now that he's back at center, it gives the Islanders a bit of a different look than what they've had over the last year and a half, roughly. They've experimented with him on the wing. They've experimented with him at center. Dive deeper into this for us. How is Barzal, maturing and advancing here? Because he never really was that good on faceoffs. He was never really a two-way center. It was always the offensive type. He needs someone else to win the faceoffs for him. Where do you see him standing this year?
Yeah, I think the year and a half with Bo Horvat was instrumental for Barzal. Forget the offensive numbers. He put up great offensive numbers with him. It would make a lot of sense for them to stay together. Had the Islanders gotten a number 2 center after Brock Nelson, got traded to Colorado and re-signed there, or if Callum Ritchie was ready and proved to be a number 2 guy, Barzal's probably still in the wing. So by necessity, he's back at center. And Patrick Waugh spoke the other day watching the Islanders in the 2019 playoffs, and then 2020, 2021. He loved Barzal at center, what he's able to do. But what I will say is that year and a half with Bo Horvat changed Barzal's mindset on how to play defensively. He played alongside a guy in Bo Horvat who is a 200-foot player, really strong in his own zone. And while Barzal wasn't as deep in the D zone as a center would be, Barzal, I think, led the league, or he had the most forced turnovers he's ever had in his career. He was stealing pucks. He was playing more responsible defensively. I think back to center, he now understands what he has to do defensively to be effective. The faceoffs are going to be a thing. Anders Lee is probably going to take some of them at times. Maybe you'll see Palmieri take some of them. But Barzal, yeah, he's a center iceman. He's got to win better, do a better job in the faceoff. I think he's at 40-something% for his career, maybe a little higher than that. He's got to be a lot better. And I've seen it after practice. He's worked on them. But I think Barzal, with an understanding on how to be a defensive center, watching Bo Horvat, you look at a guy like Jean-Gabriel Pageau as well, even Case Zizekas. I think Barzal's been able to pick up really good habits over this year and a half. And for offense, center of the ice, the way Barzal's able to skate, we've seen a lot less of him peeling on the half wall, waiting, going back to the point. He's driving the net now. If he's going to drive the net and look shot, it's going to make him really hard for defensemen to guess what he's going to do. I think the hardest part with Matthew Barzal is who could play with him. That's the biggest question. It's been an issue. And I'll put some of the blame on Barzal with that because, he doesn't make it easy for his line mates. You got to find the right pieces. Is Anders Lee and Palmieri the right pieces? He's played with Lee before and had great success. Palmieri looks really good in camp as well. So you have to hope. But he's so good transitioning the puck and going to open space and finding that I think this is a big year for him to show that not only can he be a serviceable center iceman again, but that he could be a 1A or a 1B, if you will, to Horvat this year and really, really excel in those little areas where centers have to excel to be effective.
You mentioned it before with Matthew Schaefer playing alongside Scott Mayfield. How important is it? Because we've seen it around the league before with an offensive guy in Schaefer paired with a more defensive-minded defenseman to allow that young player to not only grow, but to allow him to play his game.
Yeah, it's you look at when the Islanders draft Matthew Schaefer, you immediately go to Scott Mayfield, defensive defenseman. People can knock Scott Mayfield all they want for what they're paying him. He does exactly what his job is. He kills penalties. Well, we'll see if they kill penalties this year. They were second to last year. But the point is that he gets put on the penalty kill unit. He eats minutes, and he stays at home. And I think for Schaefer, we talk about his offense. That's kind of like his thing. But people forget how good of a defenseman he is. Defensive, we've seen the back checks. They've been all over social media or you watch him live. I mean, his skating's superb, but he's so smart in his own zone. Mayfield allows Schaefer to do what he wants to do. Now, again, they'll have to work on communication. There's been a couple of times where both got caught up the ice. Like, the whole point is Scott is not going to get caught up the ice. And if he does, Schaefer gets back. But Scott Mayfield is so important to Schaefer and allowing Schaefer to just play his game. Schaefer doesn't have if Schaefer is playing with a guy like D'Angelo or maybe a Pulak, he's got to worry about that partner jumping up on the rush too often or things like that. And you don't want that. You want Schaefer to focus on himself. On the flip side, I think Matthew Schaefer is so perfect for Scott Mayfield. This is a guy in Scott Mayfield who was a healthy scratch, more or less, right after the Four Nations face-off. He had a one bad game against Dallas, and that was it. He was out of the lineup, and now, obviously, this year, the Islanders, whether it's Matthew Darch or Patrick Waugh, they're putting a ton of faith in him to be that guy, but I think it also allows Mayfield to get back to basics. Just play your basic brand of hockey. Schaefer is so mature. His IQ is off the charts that this should be a really good tandem. the one question mark becomes, when does it become a point where Schaefer needs to play more minutes and he has to move on from Scott Mayfield? Or if Scott Mayfield's playing really well, do you just pick that whole pairing up and make them that number 2 pairing and move Pellick and Pulak down? So that'll be a great problem for the Islanders to have. But yeah, I think that's a match made in heaven. The question is, after this year, if Schaefer really proves that he could be a number 1, you got to go out there on the market or the trade deadline and find that defenseman. Like Aaron Ekblad would have been a great fit this summer had they known, that they had the cap space and things like that. And he wanted to be with the Islanders for a guy like Schaefer. I think this summer, especially, it's going to be huge and paramount for the Islanders to go get a perfect partner for this guy. Because listen, Scott Mayfield's great at what he does, but it gets to a point where, Mayfield can't be playing top pairing minutes if they believe Schaefer's ready for that after the season.
Again, great analysis of Schaefer and Mayfield there. And I want to take this off the ice with Schaefer for a second. As a young kid, obviously coming in, you need some veteran leadership to help support him, not just on the ice, but, off the ice. And he's got some great leaders around the team, some great veterans in Anders Lee, Bo Horvat, Matthew Barzal, Casey Cizikas. Obviously, we've got a heck of a coach in Patrick Waugh. But how crucial is it? And this is no disrespect to Butch Goring or to Dred Picker and Tristan. Now that Cal Clutterbuck and Thomas Hickey and them are going to be around the team more often, Matt Martin, they're going to be around the team a lot as the broadcasters and with the alternate cast and the podcast and all those different things. How important is it to have players like that who are from more recent vintages of the Islanders? Butch played back in the 80s, Hickey and all them, they played, 5-10 years, over the last few years. How important is it to have guys like that who are going to be around to help Schaefer get acclimated?
Oh, it's beyond critical. And you mentioned Matt Martin. I'm glad you did, because you saw the video on social media of Schaefer playing with his kid. I joked with Sydney that Schaefer's closer to Matt Martin's daughter's age than actually Matt's age. And it's true. I did the math, crunched the numbers. We call it analysis. But you look at Matt Martin. I want to rub it in his face again. No, you look at Matt Martin, and he really took this kid in, act like a big brother. And Schaefer will tell you that every day about how awesome Matt Martin's been. There's 4 or 5 teammates that would bring Schaefer in to live with them probably this year. Everyone's offering, they want to live with this kid. But you mentioned it. Having guys that understand the importance of the logo, that aren't from a time when Schaefer wasn't alive. I mean, to be honest, was Schaefer even alive for Clutterbuck's debut? I don't know, probably. But guys that understand the importance of the Islanders now. And, all these guys decided to stay. Hickey's still here. Clutterbuck's here. Josh Bailey now doing stuff is still here. These are guys that were on those runs in 2020 and 2021, right? These are guys that were part of, as close as this group has gotten to winning their 5th Stanley Cup. They're hungry to see Schaefer go and help this team win it. So I think it's vital to have the leaders. If you look in the room, Matthew Barzal is 28, right? So he's a guy that knows what it's like to be a first-round pick. He lived with Dennis Seidenberg. I talked to Barzal about, how important was it to live with a vet? And he goes, dude, you don't know how to cook. You don't know what you're doing, setting the alarm, getting up, going to practice, being on top of your nutrition, all that stuff. The good thing about Schaefer is he's a sponge when it comes to everything. We have to work on his bagel order. But besides that, he's a sponge to everything, whether it's on the ice and off the ice. So I think having all these veterans and these voices, and even again, we talk about veterans like Simon Holmstrom. What is this, his 5th year, like just in the organization? I think it's his 4th NHL season. But guys that have been here that are younger, and I think that's so important when you have young guys that you can relate to. I mean, even Schaefer going to Matt Martin, that's a huge age gap. But Schaefer going and talking to Isaiah George, who's still at training camp, he's going to get cut and sent down to Bridgeport. But asking him questions, what it was like last year in the NHL, he knows it best. What it's like as recent Mark Gackham. So I think everyone in the organization, from Matthew Darch all the way down to broadcasting, even the equipment manager who is part of Lightning Burger, like talking to everyone is so huge for this kid, and it's great because he learns so fast. And it's important. You can't build a culture. You look at Connor Bedard, like. Thankfully, they go out and try to get players to play with him. Maybe they need to do a better job, but I feel bad at prospects that go to the worst team in the league. Usually how it works. The Islanders got lucky where they 3.5% chance, but you go to these really, really bad teams where the culture is all it is losing. Schaefer comes to a team that's, mid in the sense of like they're not good enough to win a Stanley Cup, but they should be in the playoffs every year, that kind of thing. But it's in a great spot where they're trying to win in the next couple of years. They're going to have young players coming in. So, yeah, I think it's a perfect spot for Schaefer, and he's taking full advantage of it so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned, we keep talking about Matthew Schaefer, but I mean, you got to look at what else they did in that draft. Like the 2 other first-round picks that they picked up. Aitchison and Eklund, I mean, those guys fell right to them as part of the Noah Dobson trade they get from Montreal, along with Emil Heineman. I mean, talk about those two players. What have you seen from them?
Krishan Aitchison is a much better skater than I even thought. And to be honest, at development camp, I thought he still had to work on his skating. And he came to rookie camp, and you can see, and through training camp, you could see that he put in the work. And this is a guy that he's known for his defense. We were talking to Romanov. He goes, he's just like me. North American speaks English, but just like me in the sense of these open ice hits. Like, Aitchison is going to be a fan favorite. But you have to remember, I think he scored 26 goals last year with Barrie. This is a guy, again, I know it's juniors, and, Matt Martin tore it up in Sarnia. Like, these guys tear it up, and you come to the NHL and you learn your role. Is he just more than a bottom pairing defenseman? Probably not, but guess what you need to win Stanley Cups? Bottom pairing physical defensemen that do that job, that can kill penalties, that can provide a little bit of offense. So I think the Islanders are really excited about Aitchison, who went 17th. But you talk about Victor Eklund at 16. Small dude. And when you're small, you got to do a lot of other things well. And he's an exceptional skater. He's got an exceptionally quick shot, and he's not scared to get hit. And Matthew Dart's joked that he actually gets hurt so much because he tries so hard to go to the dirty areas and things like that. And he's playing in New Gardens with Frondell, which is really important. I know they've been scratched. There's been things happening over there. They're struggling in their first year in the big club over there after being raised up after winning the championship last year. But yeah, these are two bright guys. And you look at Daniil Prokhorov too, who they got later on in the draft in the second round. And this is a guy that made the KHL as an 18-year-old. He's been bouncing around between the KHL, the VHL, and the MHL, but he just scored his first KHL goal the other day. Thomas Politin, who they got in the fourth round, I believe it was the fourth and the third round. He went first overall in the import draft, and this guy doesn't stop scoring. He's playing for Sarnia. So the Islanders this year in the draft. Then you talk about Emil Heineman, who right now is skating with Bo Horvat and Jonathan Drouin. Is he a top line guy? Probably not. The Islanders are going to try them there. Looks like it. But what the Islanders were able to do post the Dobson deal, which was kind of forced, there were better deals on the table for Columbus, but Dobson wasn't willing to sign there. So they get what they get in that Montreal trade. And again, prospects, they prove it, but you got to look at this future, and especially with Yzerman next year potentially coming, Danny Nelson, Camille Bednarik, Quinn Finley. Like, there's reasons for the goaltending depth that they have in Gidliff and Gamzin overseas. Like, there's a bright future. I mean, I think the Athletic, I'm not a huge fan of ranking prospect pools because, again, you never know. But the Islanders are bottom 5 in the league, and now they're 2. So big difference this drafted for them for sure.
Oh, I feel like you named every reasonable named prospect in the Islanders.
Luca Romano. We didn't name Luca Romano. I think he went in the 4th. I'm trying to get them back. But skating-wise, not saying he's Matthew Barzal, but the edge work is there. There was clearly, speed and skill, and maybe a little grit. That's kind of what Matthew Darch is looking for, and I think he nailed it on every pick.
Absolutely. And, Stefen, before we let you go and before we wrap here on the Blue Line Blast podcast, we've talked about a lot of players up and down the Islanders roster, both NHL level, AHL, the whole thing, KHL. If you had to choose one player who's going to be an X factor for the Islanders this year, who would it be, and where, with that X factor, where do you think the Islanders end up this year?
Yeah, I think Schaefer's too easy. I'm going to go with Anthony Duclair. This is a guy that signed a 4-year deal. Game 5, he looked good out of the gate. I think he had 2 goals and assists through 5 games, and in that 5th game, tears his groin off the bone, comes back, I think, 21 games later, and then he tells us, we hadn't talked to him after he takes that 8-game hiatus, 8-game leave of absence because Patrick Waugh called him out. So it was a messy first year for Duclair on the island, but he's come into camp and he looks really good. He looks like Anthony Duclair, where, Michael Grabner, I'm not knocking Grabner, all the speed in the world, and maybe at times in his career he struggled to finish. Duclair is showcasing this speed, and he's finishing. He's putting up goals in all these preseason games. He's putting up assists. He's forechecking hard. He's getting back. His shot looks fantastic. He's very confident. He has Jonathan Drouin, his best friend here. Drouin's important as well, but having Duclair, whether he's playing on the top line, the second line, or third line, having that speed where he's a big body as well that can win puck battles, go to the front, help out on the power play, instrumental. And the fact that, he told us before camp that he was still feeling it and he had to work his way back. And I don't know if he was doing that way he would look really, really good. And we were like, oh, wow, he's absolutely fine. He looks exceptional. So I think Duclair is a huge part because he's here for another 3 years. Yes, they could trade him if they want, but I talked to Matthew Darch, and Darch said he's going to have to play a big part in this team this year. So I look at Duclair, whatever line he's on, maybe if he's with Barzal, to be an absolute difference maker this year for sure. And stay healthy, obviously, is the most important key.
All right, so here's my last one before we wrap up. And it's a 2-parter, but it's more off the ice with the Islanders. First one, how great is it for Pat LaFontaine to go into the Islanders Hall of Fame to get him back with the organization? And two, what the thoughts on the Super Bowl media day for the Islanders this year before the Olympics? And do we have an idea of what the event is next year?
Yeah, so Pat LaFontaine, it's awesome. I mean, I've gotten to know Pat Fontaine a little bit. This guy, forget on the ice. Obviously, we know what he's done with the Islanders, and they had their falling out, and it's great that he's back. But off the ice, he's still in the community doing great work. I mean, a lot of these ex-Islanders do that, but he's an awesome individual, and he cares so much about the Islander fan base and what they meant to him. And he did it in Buffalo as well and still does. But that's incredibly awesome. Well-deserved. Probably took a little too long. Moving on to the Super Bowl media event. Yeah, I mean, I wish they would have done an on-ice thing. We understand why they can't. You don't want anyone to get hurt and things like that. But it sounds like it's going to be a Super Bowl type thing where it's open to the fans. I think that's going to be the coolest part. As fans will come and I don't know if they probably won't be able to ask questions and stuff, but they can walk around and see things and all that stuff. And then for next year, I'm not sure what they're going to do. I think, there's a chance that maybe UBS and MSG hosting, maybe the Devils host things as well, and keep it a metropolitan area thing. But right now we don't know. But listen, the Islanders are supposed to get the All-Star game. We obviously know what happened with that. So it'll be exciting stuff as well for them to get at least an event there where they can host and feel pride. And the question is, well, how many Islanders are going to be in the Olympics, right? That's the other big question. But Matthew Barzal got left on the Team Canada invite for their thing that happened before the season this past summer. And he's probably hungry. I know he said today, he talked to Ethan Susan in the New York Post yesterday about his focus on the Islanders. It's the correct answer, but he wants to be a guy that's going to be hungry to play for Team Canada. Horvat might be there. Obviously, you don't have a Russian team, so Sorokin can't be there, and maybe Romanov and those guys. But Holmstrom, can he make Team Sweden? So it's an exciting time for the Islanders, the way Dart has opened everything up, and the league wants to have events. Matt, you remember Blittner, like they were like, NASA Coliseum wasn't a drug. Bettman wanted them out of the Coliseum. And Barca's obviously didn't work, but having a home that the not only are the Islanders proud of, but the league is proud of to do events, that's massive as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great analysis of the event, Stefen. And again, thanks so much for coming on the Blue Line Blast podcast with us here on really just our Islander preview show, Jim. Between all the Islanders talk that we've done between Peter Schwartz and now Stefen Rosner. Jim, over to you for our annual wrap.
Yeah, guys, this has been the Blue Line Blast podcast. Stefen Rosner, thank you so much for coming on. We had Peter Schwartz earlier around the league, but a lot of Islanders talk. Jim Biringer, Matthew Blittner, guys, take care. We'll be back again real soon.